Hi there, I'm MJ Peters. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this Lincoln Calling panel, Digital Experience. Today, this panel, we're going to be talking about sobriety in the scene with a focus on addiction in the world of entertainment. I'm super excited to be the moderator for this discussion. Again, my name is MJ Peters. I'm with Omaha Creative Directory, and I'm also a performer myself. I perform under the name Mad Darling. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to our panelists and let them introduce themselves, starting with Grant. Hi, Grant. How are you?
Hey, how's it going, y'all? Thanks for having me. My name is Grant. As MJ said, I'm a stand-up comedian and filmmaker. I'm originally from Lincoln, so very happy to be a part of Lincoln Calling. I'm based in Austin, Texas right now.
Awesome, perfect. Our next panelist is Catherine. Catherine, you want to say hello?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm very grateful to be here. My name is Catherine Pompeo, and I am a yoga instructor in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I teach people who are recovering from addiction. So that's my main focus with my service. And so I'm just, very grateful to be here. Thanks for inviting me to the panel.
Lovely to have you. Thank you both. Next, we have Jonathan.
I'm muted. I'm sorry. Hi, my name's Jonathan Leach. I live here in Lincoln. I'm a full-time musician. I'm the music director at City Impact, a nonprofit here in town. Just really happy to be here. This is cool.
Awesome. Perfect. And last we have Sadie. Sadie, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Sadie Thompson. I am the Chief Implementation Officer for the Wellbeing Initiative. We're a peer-run organization, and by peer, I mean a group of people who have lived experience with mental health and substance use challenges. I'm a person in recovery, and I'm super stoked to be able to be here with you guys.
Awesome. So great to have you all. I'm really looking forward to this topic. I'm very curious to hear all of your stories. Jumping right into our first question, how does one adjust to living substance-free? How do you find acceptance or normalization of sobriety, whether that be in your experience or any tips on what would be helpful for that? Whoever wants to jump in. We don't need to have a certain order.
For me, the hardest part about being transitioning, right? Transitioning, the hardest part about that is trying to convince people that it's legitimate. You're a certain way for so long, and it's a way that's widely accepted. It's the general consensus. So once you start to deviate from it, it's really hard to get people to respect that choice, just because it's not necessarily normal or as widely accepted. So for me specifically, the hardest part or the biggest obstacle in transitioning was letting go of my kind of internal desire to get people to understand or appreciate my choice. Once I kind of let that go, I was able to just live my truth and just be free of it.
Yeah, I think that's definitely was a piece of it for me. Also, just doing all the things that I used to do, like wasted, sober, was a really, it was really challenging. It was like, oh, I've never gone grocery shopping sober before. This is weird. Or oh gosh, Christmas dinner with my family.
Yeah.
They're not sober, but I am, that's bizarre. And so there's pieces of my life that stayed the same, looked like they stayed the same, but I was sober for it. And then there were pieces of my life like, it's not really that much fun to go down to the bars all the time with my friends when I'm not drinking. It like, yeah, no, we really don't have as much in common as I thought we did. I'm just standing around and y'all are getting wasted. So like finding new fun things to do with people who were also sober or whose main focus wasn't getting wasted was kind of a big challenge for me. And it took me about my first year to kind of find some new friends and a new group of people that I felt at home with.
Yeah, just to piggyback both Sadie and Jonathan, I think the hardest part, in that transition is letting go of your kind of identity and kind of what Sadie was saying with the scene that you're in, whether that's if you're just in a bar scene or if you're in a music scene, comedy scene, whatever. Just now you don't identify with those people as much, and you're trying to build a new identity for yourself as a sober person. And I think that's what Jonathan was saying. It's like, it's hard for people to believe, like, okay, yeah, we'll see how long this lasts, or, So I think those first few months, for me especially, that's the biggest challenge.
And I kind of have maybe a different perspective because I don't deal with substance or addiction, any kind of abuse, substance abuse or addictions. And so, but I have my own addictive traits that I notice. But I spent a lot of my adult life, I would take periods of time where I didn't drink or I didn't do any drugs at all. And I would go to places where my friends were and sit there and watch them. And it was just not a very comfortable thing for me because I felt, like, in a way I was kind of judging them because of the way they acted when they weren't sober, And so, it's different. And I've bartended and I've been a cocktail waitress and watched people, and now it's by choice that I choose to be sober and to be clear-minded. And like Sadie was saying too, that's changed who the people that I associate with or that I want to hang around with, because it just doesn't fit. The energy's different. I mean, so that's my perspective of it.
All right. And I'm sure you all have different stories of how you guys came to this point, but how did you know when it was the time to make this decision, this change of lifestyle? How did you know it was the right time?
For me personally, the first time I got sober I was 25, and I had just moved to Texas, and I was living with my sister and nephew, and I realized that I had brought a lot of my habits, call them habits, addictions, with me. And that was the first time it was like really eye-opening to be like living with your family and watching a 4-year-old, and you're like, oh, I'm drinking a pint of whiskey every night to fall asleep. I'm not going to the bars every night. I'm not in that scene. I don't have that identity, but this is what I still need, and I'm dependent on it. And so that was a big eye-opener for me. And I decided just to do a month sober. I was going to do dry July, and I hit 30 days, and I just started feeling better, and I kept the ball rolling. And I let that roll for 363 days, and I kind of that was all, I gave the glory to myself. I was like, yeah, this is me through willpower staying sober. And little did I know, it takes more than that. You can't do it by yourself. And I fell off the wagon, and I thought I could just start drinking again. I was like, okay, maybe it's not a problem. Maybe I can just casually drink. And that eventually led into spiraled into what pretty much was an 11-month bender for me. And then just, through loved ones and just another wake-up call, decided to get sober again. So for me, it took that being sober for a year, that falling off the wagon, and seeing like, oh, you can't just casually drink, and just that acceptance.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned kind of having a start and then kind of falling off the wagon, because that was a part of my story too. This time, I got sober on what some people call a legal scholarship, which means I needed to be sober so that I could stop getting in trouble. But before that, I mean, everyone in my family also experiences addiction issues, so it was a very talked about thing. And they all had been sober and not sober at different points in my life and kind of warned me about it. So I had tried to get sober before that, before being 24 years old, about 10 times for about 8 years. And the longest I could ever stay sober by myself was about 53 days. And then it was like I had white knuckled it long enough that my fists were tired, and I just had to, take a drink or smoke a joint or whatever. And so this time I really leaned on a recovery community. And I kind of did some things that other people who'd been sober longer than me suggested that I do, and like followed them around. And what's interesting is the people that wanted me to get sober when I was younger weren't sober when I got sober this time. And I actually ended up influencing a couple of them. And they were like, I'll get sober with you. And so it was interesting because they were always like, Sadie, you really need to get sober. And I was like, nah. And then I got sober and they were like, oh, wow, if she's getting sober, I probably should too. So thanks for mentioning that. I think it's an important piece. People don't realize that a lot of us don't just get sober and then we're sober forever. Like, we have to try multiple times with multiple different routes to figure out what works for us.
For me, it was very similar to that too. There was like a lot of times where I was saying to myself, like, I've always been like really health conscious, and so there was, and my dad is like very fit, so I knew that like for me the way that I was living wasn't necessarily how I wanted to be as far as like health and fitness went, but it was fine. But the moment that I really noticed it, I was pursuing music like a couple of years prior, and I had this really good momentum. I had this momentum, and I felt like I was going places and that things were lining up so that I could have like a successful future in the music world. And then there was this moment where I caught myself saying like this kind of like crazy excuse as to why I didn't want to make it as a musician. Like, I had spent and cultivated my entire life trying to do this one thing. And then somebody was like, why are you here? They had like said something. I was working at a bar and they were like, why are you here? And I was like, oh man, cause music industry's da 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 da. And like, I caught myself while I was saying it and I was like, oh, you're lying. and it was really eye opening, right? Cause I was wasted and there was just this like moment of like sobriety, like a rational part of my brain that was like, dude, this is an excuse. And then after that, I started being kind of, I got addicted to this, to answering the question, right? Like, why do I keep making these excuses? Why have I not gone any farther? Why am I still here? Why am I still at this bar? Why am I drinking every night? Why am I getting blacked out? Why am I not writing? Why am I not creating? Why am I not trying to push this further? And this is my life's dream. And so, yeah, so then after that, then it was just this kind of pursuit to answer that question, which ultimately led to me realizing that I needed to be sober.
I think for me, I got tired of the suffering. So I personally have had a lot of alcoholics and addicts in my life. Two of my children are both have addiction issues. And there was just, you know, I think like a lot of us do, I looked outside of myself to try to find things to make me happy. So I did try alcohol. I did try drugs. I tried shopping all the time. I tried, making other people happy. I mean, relationship things, all that stuff. I tried trying to make me happy, and it didn't end the suffering, right? And I started going to some meetings when my son was going into treatment, and I went to Al-Anon. And I was hearing other people that were suffering too. And that was really an eye-opener for me, because of course I thought I was the only one that suffered. Nobody else has the pain that I have, right? And then shortly after that, I went to live in an ashram for about 30 days to do training for yoga. And in the philosophy of yoga, they're telling me the same thing, that we come here and there's suffering, and everybody's looking outside of themselves to end that suffering, to become happy. And when I heard that, and I'd been hearing it from two different places, and I just knew that there was something more to life than what I had been doing that day to day, trying to fix this and fix that and run and do whatever it is, that I needed to stop and look inside and find out who I was, and why am I here, right? And at that was a turning point for me. And at that point, my teacher had said something, somebody had asked him about, is smoking pot okay? And he said, well, you want to have a clear mind. And I thought, yeah, I do. I want my mind to be clear. I want to enjoy life, and I want to see it, and I want to feel it, right? And whether it's a good or bad feel. And so I think that was, for me, was a huge turning point. And that's when I decided that was it, that I don't need that stuff anymore. So, yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. So I guess I'm super curious about, I want to take time with this question, being in the industry and talking about, being as entertainers, or I guess, as you're healing. How does being sober affect performance, work? How does it affect being in that scene, like at events, and how you interact socially?
I think a lot of performers, especially performers that are addicts, we don't realize it, but we lean on substance for crutch, and we tell ourselves, oh, I need this shot before I get on stage because it's going to loosen me up and I'm going to perform better. Or, I always told myself, I'm gonna Hunter S. Thompson this script. I'm gonna do drugs, and I'm gonna live life crazy just for the story. And in reality, you don't get very many of those stories, because you either black out and you forget them, or they're really just not that good of stories, and it's not worth it. And I think, yeah, relying on that as a performer, it's hard, because you're engulfed in a scene where alcohol is around you constantly, and it's when you're in it, like, every night, the audience and those people aren't there every night. Maybe they're going out having a drink like a normal person, a couple drinks, and that's good. But you're there every night, and you're drinking every night, and it just kind of blends in to the norm. It just seems normal, and you're camouflaged, and I think it's really hard to snap out of that, because it's kind of going back to what we were saying before. It becomes your identity, and the people around you are the same way, and they're either in denial or just adding fuel to your fire. So just being able to step out and look at it that way. So.
Yeah, being that's so accurate. It's so true. Being like a performer, because I play music all the time, and as much as, you know, I'd love to not be in bars every day, I it's kind of that's the job. And I was like just kind of joking about this like 2 days ago with a friend, because I was like, man, it'd be so sweet if we could just get the money that they would give us for free drinks added to the check. Like if I could just get the money for all the free drinks that I'm not drinking for every place that I go to, and they're like, the drinks are on the house, and I'm like, sick. You know, it's just stuff like that. But it's stuff like that that messes with you, especially when you're sober, because the incentive it's free. It's like being an addict, man, and then somebody just coming and giving you exactly what you want on a platter, and then like revering you for being in that light too. Like being a patron of the place that you're performing at it's a symbiotic relationship. So it's a weird existence to have this relationship with a place that kind of facilitates an environment that you actually don't want to participate in that respect, but also, right, but like to not be there. It's a place where you're constantly working against the grain. So it's like that every day that you go to work, every day that you perform. It's and it's never like not, you know, it might not be as intense some days, but it's never not a tempting offer to have free drugs, free alcohol. And yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've been sober for years now, and it's still like, damn, maybe today. Like sometimes I'm like, maybe today. And then I'm like, no. But right, it's hard to refuse a platter that's being gifted to you and beautifully presented and crafted. When they treat you like a superstar, it makes you want to take that gift even more, right? Just out of respect, or, you know, like a mutual courtesy. And so yeah, it's tough for sure.
Yeah, I think I have to come from a little bit of a different perspective. So I actually was a professional ballet and tap dancer for 10 years prior to getting sober. I've never professionally danced sober, but it was it tied really easily into performing arts, because when you need to work 9 hours a day and then also have a life, you know, there's a lot of things that can help you stay up and keep moving and work through the pain and all of that. And so it just kind of was a symbiotic relationship, obviously, until it wasn't anymore. But I think there's a level of perfectionism that comes along with that type of performance art, and I'm sure a lot of performance art, but there's an intense perfectionism. And so when I did get sober and I started teaching dance and choreographing stuff for people, that perfectionism came out with like claws, because I didn't have those substances to kind of like chill it out a little bit and be like, you know, the edges can be a little blurry. Like everything it had to be perfect. It had to be exactly this way, the way that I see it in my mind. We're going to practice it until it's perfect. And like, you know, artists don't necessarily work very well in that environment either. especially if you're being more intense than they are. And so I had to really learn how to do that piece of my craft in a more relaxed setting. Like, just chill, bro. Like, a little bit of their self-expression should come through. What do you think you're doing? You're choreographing movement art. The thing that's cool about movement art is that different bodies do it in different ways. So that was a huge learning curve for me, was to relax a little bit and like find some serenity within me instead of trying to focus, like Catherine was saying, on like it being perfect on the outside so that I could feel good about it. But I think the other piece too is for me, like going to shows, because I've always loved going to shows. And as a dancer, listening to music and being out on that dance floor is like where my heart's at, you know? And doing that sober was so weird. I remember going and dancing and feeling like everybody's staring at me and this is so awkward. And it's like, you know what? Everybody else is probably pretty high, or they're having a great time and they don't care what you look like. And so it took 3 or 4 shows for me to like finally find my groove again on the dance floor. But then like I recognized I'm going to all these shows, and a few years back I got to see DJ Shadow, and way back in the day, DJ Shadow was like my jam, my wasted jam, and I saw him sober and I remember the whole show. And I mean, I kind of aged myself a little bit there for being in the scene, but like it was the coolest thing. It was like, oh my God, I saw this dude that I like iconized for so long, like, and I remember the whole show. Right. And so then like getting to see Tool just recently in A Perfect Circle and seeing it and remembering the whole show, remembering which songs I thought were the coolest and the best done. And that to me has been the most hopeful and inspiring part of getting sober and being in the scene, is that like I actually remember the shows and I have so much more fun, and I'm not falling into people when I'm dancing. I'm actually aware of where my body is, which is always a good thing. So yeah, I guess I had kind of 2 different perspectives on that, but hopefully I didn't talk for too long.
And I'm just going to say, just short version here. I too was a dancer too, and my dad was a jazz musician. So I was raised in all of that. My mom was a dancer and a yoga teacher, and yeah, and so I love to go dance. And so I am the sober person that gets out on the dance floor when nobody else is out there, and I don't care, you know, and I'm comfortable with that now, but also I'm like in my 50s. So, you know, it's different than it was when I was in my 20s or 30s. I wasn't comfortable like that. But, you know, even, and now I don't do that. I don't go out too much, and I love music, but I don't want to go sit in a bar and listen to music. I mean, I can only take so much of being around people that are drinking and are getting wasted. And that's just not where I want to be. So, unfortunately, I don't get to do the things that I used to really enjoy doing. So I dance around the house, or, you know, and that's fine. But yeah, it's different. It's a whole different, I don't think I could dance when I was wasted. Like, I'm opposite from you, Sadie, because I was just like, I was too embarrassed. But anyway, so that's all I had to say.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's super interesting to hear these stories. I guess it kind of piggybacks off of that, but how has being sober affected your health in general? I guess like not only mental health, but physical health. If anyone has any stories about that.
Yeah, I think as soon as I got sober, you know, those first 30 days, you feel a drastic difference. Not only just, oh, I'm not hungover every morning. I I think when you're drinking every night, you become used to being hungover in the mornings, and that becomes the norm. And then, yeah, I remember that hangover when I fell off the wagon. You know, the first hangover after falling off the wagon after a year, that should have been enough to be like, okay, we don't do this anymore. But as far as just like health, me personally, as an addict, I've found other ways to feel my addiction. So working out becomes the new addiction, you know, runner's high or lifting weights, and people look at you and they're like, you're so dedicated. It's like, no, I'm a crazy person. And you see it right away, you know, you lose weight, you feel better. Mental health wise, that's a whole nother story. Me personally, I was diagnosed just this past year with ADHD and bipolar 2. And I realized so much of my drinking was coping with that bipolar and those spirals, and using it to mask something deeper. And so, you know, just sobriety is self-discovery and learning so many new things about yourself. And yeah.
Yeah, I completely, like, exactly agree with that. I like the moment, like when I started getting sober, it was easy for me to fill that space with physical activity. I think there's something that feels really good about like getting rid of toxins. Once you like consciously choose to like take all the toxins out of your life, then you're like, I want to get all of them out. Some sort of like subconscious thought process there, I'm sure. But yeah, my physical health has never been better. My mental health, I don't think, it's not that my mental health is worse. It's that I'm able to look at my mental health under a clear scope now. And so though I feel like it's like, oh, it's so much worse, it's being illuminated, and I'm in a place where I can consciously do work on it, right? As opposed to just kind of covering it up for years. It's crazy, yeah. But I feel the same way.
Did you guys notice when you got sober that you were more of a sweets person after you quit drinking? Anybody relate to that?
I was more of a fast food person.
Yeah, you trade up. I call it trading. I know some people call it trading up. Like I eat a pint of ice cream every night instead of drinking myself to sleep. But yeah, that was a big eye opener, because when I drank, I was like, yeah, I'm not a big sweets guy. And then like that first month, you're like, oh, I'm going through sugar withdrawal because there's so much sugar in alcohol.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, trading up. I highly recommend it for people that are starting to get sober. If you're craving those, just go bag of M&Ms. Everything will be okay.
I'm gonna giggle about that because I'm type 1 diabetic, so I've had diabetes since I was a kid, and I could not trade up into sugar. That wasn't an option. But oh man, does dark chocolate help with cravings. I will say that, and that's pretty low sugar option. But I know a lot of people, they later find out too, I know like several of my friends, that they can't really overdo sugar in sobriety either, because it starts to get like, that starts to become kind of like an addiction. And we all know that too much sugar can cause a lot of health issues. But I'm not going to get on that soapbox today. But because I'm type 1 diabetic, my health was in terrible condition when I got sober. I mean, I was severely underweight, and eating was just not a thing that I did very often. I got most of my calories from booze, and so like learning how to feed my body in a healthy way was a whole new journey. And I went through a lot of different phases with that. I was a gluten-free raw vegan for 3 years of my sobriety, and that was fun. But really learning how to like fuel your body with just plants and I had a lot of stomach stuff because I hadn't been feeding my body right. So it took several years for my body to start kind of like behaving normally with food and stuff. So there's that. But I think, what Jonathan said about being aware of your mental health, I think I buried it pretty deeply with substance use. So just in the last 9 years, I've been able to recognize, I do experience a lot of the things of PTSD and major depression. And I have to stay on top of that just as much as I have to stay on top of being sober, whether it be like exploring new kinds of therapy, like EMDR has been a lifesaver for PTSD for me. Like figuring out sometimes I do need medication, and like that doesn't mean that I'm not sober. Just because, I have some brain imbalances. Anyone who's experienced the life that I've experienced and had and used substances for as long as I did might have a chemical imbalance in their brain. And you know what? That's totally okay. Like, treat that stuff. I almost cussed, but I promised myself I wouldn't here today. So I'm grateful that today I have a healthy body and a healthy mind, and like my body's healthy enough that I'm sitting here 5 months pregnant, and like that couldn't have happened 9 years ago. So anyway, that's enough out of me.
And I'll just throw in from what I tell when I teach at the Bridge, and a shout out to the Bridge, is I tell them there that, in addiction, there's a disconnection, right, from your body and from your spiritual self and from your emotions. And when you practice something mindful like yoga or some kind of a mindful meditation, that's when you're able to start reconnecting. And that's basically what I do when I teach there, is like just to start feeling what you're feeling in your body. I mean, and it might be small to start with, but just to bring that back, and then giving yourself that break, that silence, that serenity or whatever, to kind of feel your emotions and feel, it's important that we listen to what's going on inside of us. And so that's what I got.
Definitely. Thank you, guys. I did want to mention, as we're coming up to the last 15 minutes, if anyone watching on live stream has any questions for our panelists, feel free to add them to the comments, and we can collect questions the last 5 minutes. But the next question I have for you guys, what about support? Like, what kind of support did you guys receive or seek out? If there is any support systems that you guys recommend to people who are sober curious, I'll let you guys talk on that.
I'll hop in first. Like I said when I started, I got sober by myself, and I gave a lot of that glory to myself, and I thought it was just, holding myself accountable and through strong will. And then, my second go around at sobriety, I pretty much learned right away that in order to stay sober, I was going to need some kind of support team or support system. Me personally, I didn't want to go the AA route right away. So I sought out a therapist that specialized in drug and alcohol addiction, had 30 years of sobriety under his belt. And we, I meet with him once a week or twice a week still. And I think it's super important for accountability for somebody that's first, if you're looking to get sober, or in those first few months, highly important to do that. Go to meetings even if you don't want to. to meet other sober people, you know, going back to that identity thing. Yeah, those are my experiences and suggestions.
I know here in Lincoln, and I know nationally, I've been trained in what's called Y12SR. It's the yoga of 12-step recovery. And so we offer, it's a 12-step based meeting, and it's followed by a yoga practice. And right now there's tons of them online, but they're all over the place. So we've been doing that over 5 years here in Lincoln. We're kind of on a hiatus now because of the coronavirus, and then I had to have some hip surgery, so I'm out. But that has been an alternative. I know that there's also Refuge Recovery, which is a Buddhist meditation type of meetings that also deal with addiction and everything. And so I think that there are other things out there besides the 12-step programs themselves and going into the rooms. But, you know, I think I had a teacher. I also have studied what is called yoga of recovery, which brings in the Ayurvedic part of yoga, which is the health part of it. So the foods and what we're bringing into our bodies. And her theory is that, you know, we're all looking for something outside of ourselves, and what we're really looking for is that thing inside, and you can call it whatever you want. You know, some people call it God, some people call it Mother Earth or the community or the higher power, whatever it is, but that's kind of what we're searching for. And so I think anytime that you are able to start looking for something greater than you and have something that you feel some devotion for and connection to, that's a help. That's something that's out there for everybody. So yeah.
For me, I was extremely fortunate because I was in a place where I accidentally tricked my brain. My desires for the things that I wanted outweighed my my addiction. I had like accidentally convinced myself that it was going to kill me and my dreams, and literally like so fortunate, so lucky. I was just like, oh God. And so it was just a matter of me reminding myself of that every day and then saying it out loud to everybody around me till they believed me. And now I have a support system, you know, of people that are like, hey, he doesn't drink, stop. Like there's enough, right, that now I feel comfortable being like, no, I don't want that. And so I got super lucky. My anxiety actually like worked out in my favor in that case. So yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do a little bit of personal talking, and I'm also gonna talk from my profession, because what I do is run a peer-run organization that provides support and teaches people how to support people in recovery. So there's a lot there. But for me, when I first got sober, I knew about 12-step recovery, so I kind of dove into that. What I found was 12-step recovery, SMART recovery, WRAP, wellness recovery action planning, therapy, medication. All of those things are the kinds of supports that I need and that I still want to have in my recovery. But meeting people in those 12-step meetings helped me to have friends to do things with, so that I didn't feel alone, because I think when we get sober, sometimes we feel really alone. And if you're sober curious and you're worried about being alone on this journey and like not having any friends, there are so many cool people that are sober, especially like in the Lincoln area. There's a hopping recovery community in the Lincoln area. So like you will not be alone. There's lots of cool people. The Wellbeing Initiative provides, especially right now, with this whole COVID thing, we provide lots of support groups for people that are looking to start their recovery or just get support in their current recovery. I talked about wellness recovery action planning. There's both a group for individuals and for family members provided over Facebook Live and Zoom every week on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. And then Smart Recovery, which is a not 12-step. It's completely different than 12-step. It's based in CBT and RBT. And that's a program for addiction recovery. And we have groups of that on Zoom available at 6:30 on Mondays over Zoom and on Facebook Live. So if you check out the Wellbeing Initiative on Facebook, you can get hooked up with those. And then there's just a general peer support group. So if you're like, what's this peer support thing about? I'm in recovery and I think I'd like to make a career out of sharing my lived experience and helping other people get started on their journey. You can join that group on Thursdays at 2:00. So there's tons of recovery support, especially being locked up with COVID right now.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Sadie. Those are great tips. We do have one question in the chat. Do you have any recommendations on how to be supportive of your friends or others in the scene who are struggling with addiction?
It's a tough question depending on where that person is at with their sobriety. You know, if they're struggling and that means they're not sober currently, inevitably that person has to get sober for themselves. And just know you as an outsider to, I mean, obviously be encouraging, be a good friend, especially if they've gotten sober before. But no, you're not going to be able to change that person. And so I would keep that in mind as a support system. Yeah, that's my little 2 cents.
And I would say, as a parent who has watched her children, you know, so it's hard to not want to go fix it and make them do what you think that they need to do. And, you know, but, and just recently, my son's been through recovery twice now. And the second time, you know, he asked for help. And so until he was really ready to go, we were just there with our support and love, you know, making sure he had a meal occasionally and, you know, but it was definitely, it's his decision and as it is any of our decisions, you know, and you can't force anybody to do it, but if you can support them and not enable them, yeah, that's my input.
Totally. I think that enabling piece it's a hard line for people to distinguish sometimes what's enabling and what's supporting. I can love somebody unconditionally by giving them money to get a new phone or pay their phone bill when I gave it to them last month. That's, to me, I don't have, you know, they still haven't learned that they need to pay their phone bill, or they're still using their money for something else. And I'm kind of helping them limp along instead of, for me, I had to get to a place of desperation for myself to get sober. I had to be ready and like, I have no other options now to get sober. That's just my experience. Also, one of the things I love that helps me in supporting others and helps other people I know is like, there's nothing that I can say to somebody that's going to get them sober or make them drink. And I had to be connected with other people who'd been there. Therapists, spiritual advisors could talk to me all day long. Doctors, I don't care what you have to say. You don't know what it's like. Somebody who knows what it's like, I'm like, okay, I kind of got to listen to you. Like, I know you and I used to run the streets together, and now you're doing this and you're like living a successful life. Okay, maybe you got something I want. So connecting people to other people who are doing it is super important for me.
Yeah, you guys said everything that I think. That's great.
I've got one more little thing that I just thought of. If you're trying to be supportive, this is something people have done to me, and I just didn't realize until now how much it means. Is like if you drink and you just say you go out with a friend who's sober and you just decide not to drink that night, and even if they're like, I'm cool with you drinking, it's fine. But just like, it doesn't have to be every time, but that solidarity just means so much. Like we'd probably be, you get to a point where you're comfortable enough being around alcohol, but you're always just a little bit. And for your friend to just be like, hey, I'm not drinking, I don't need to have a drink tonight, I'm just gonna be in solidarity with you. I think that means a lot and shows a lot. So.
That's real. My husband does not have a problem drinking, but he loves to mow the lawn and have a beer. But he knows that for him, he could have a beer every day in the summer and do yard work and no big deal. But he intentionally doesn't buy beer sometimes just to not have it in the house and not, or we're grilling and normally he would like to get a fancy kind of beer and have one of those while we're grilling, and he's like, I don't need it tonight, and it just feels like, okay, cool, well, it's not going to be in the house tonight. I can feel good and supported by that.
That's awesome. Yeah, really great advice from everyone. We have 4 minutes. I just kind of wanted to leave this open. If anyone has any advice or tips of getting through COVID right now and being quarantined and locked in the house, has that been difficult or kind of helpful, or, any advice for someone who might be around substances that they're trying not to abuse, but there's nothing else to do? 3 minutes now, so not much time, but if anyone has anything to say.
I started learning French. No lie, I knew I was going to be stuck in the house. I knew that I was going to be, I don't have a huge house. I live in a very small apartment. You can only pay so far. And so the first thing I did was I bought a bunch of books. One of my friends gave me this really good book called The Worry Trick. I read it, and one of the things was hey, find a hobby. And I was like, well, I'm a musician, so I already have a hobby that occupies my time. I do it all the time. I practice rudiments and do all the stuff. So I tried something that I would never do on my own. And so I got a Babbel account, and I was like, I'm gonna learn French. And it's fun, and it's extremely hard, and it works a completely different part of my mind that I would never do. And now I'm excited all the time to do it. So that's occupied a lot of my time during COVID.
For sure, learn French if you're out there and you're struggling with COVID right now, everyone's struggling with COVID. If you're struggling with sobriety, trying to stay sober, learn French. It's actually the only way to stay sober in a pandemic is learn French. And yeah, I'll just piggyback on that. Me, like I said in the beginning, I'm a crazy person. I just decided to just go on runs every morning and work out and just feel that energy that way. Get out of the house. I need to get out of the house. I'm sure as everybody has had to do.
And I'm going to say, as a yoga teacher, even if you're noticing anxiety and depression and stuff, if you could even get an app or something, to do some mindfulness meditation, some deep breathing, stuff that really begins to activate the calmings in your body and just kind of settles you. It really helps with anxiety and something. I know a lot of people are having that now, especially when you've already got some other issues going on and then you're stuck, and don't have anybody around. So.
Yeah, and reach out to your other sober friends. reach out and check in, because overdose and relapse is super high right now. So just reach out, be there for each other, check in on each other.
I'll piggyback on that app thing too. That was a big part for me getting sober, especially not wanting to do AA. I downloaded an app on my phone. The one I use, the sobriety clock, is called NOMO. Highly recommend downloading some kind of sobriety clock when you're first getting sober, just to be able to track your progress. The apps, you can type in how much money you spend on alcohol, and it can track that, and that can motivate you. For me, it was the little chips I got from the app. And this app specifically was really good about giving you, when you first start out, it's like you made 24 hours, congratulations, 48 hours, congratulations. You just look at that every day, and time goes fast, and before you know it, you've hit a month, and then it's 2 months, 6 months, and then before you know it, you're sober for a year, and just that was monumental for me. It's so important to just have something to look at, and it's the cliche of take it one.
That's cool. I think our stream dropped like right at 5. So thank you guys so much. Grant, what was that app though? I wanted to ask you. What's that app called?
App is NOMO.
NOMO.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Cool. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure talking with you, and this was great to meet you guys virtually.
Nice to meet everyone.
See
you, Sadie.
Let's get connected on social
media. Bye. So good to see you. Nice to meet you guys.